Please note, the opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of Tri-County Orthopedics. Any medical advice or treatment recommendations discussed should always be reviewed with your own healthcare provider. This podcast is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. All right, welcome back to the OrthoZone Podcast. I'm Dr. Stephen Hunt, one of the orthopedic sports medicine specialists at Tri-County Orthopedics, here with my colleague, Dr. Andrew Willis, who is also an orthopedic hand and sports medicine specialist at Tri-County, and also the head orthopedic surgeon for the New York Jets. So we're here in episode 2, where we just talked about preseason and what it's like covering training camp and all that goes into it. And now here we are, week 1, and let's start with game day of week 1, and then we're going to work through a week of the season so people get an understanding of what is the daily life and what is the in-day experience of, you covering, or myself, or Dr. Montgomery, Dr. Hirschman covering this game. Does that sound like a plan?
Sounds like a plan.
All right. So what time do you have to show up to the stadium?
So, the day begins with all the culmination of the week's work before it, because everything on game day reflects what you did in preparation the week before. And people always understand that if you do all the work, get everything where it needs to be in terms of management of injury, progressions in rehab, then it makes game day very easy. It can. And so a big part of game day is what happened before it, which we'll get to. It's kind of going in reverse here.
Well, this is week 1, so we're a healthy team, no injuries. That's where I'm starting off. I know we both know that's like fantasy world, but that's where I want to go, because then we'll work through how we prepare the team after the game.
The teams that are likely to be successful start healthy.
Yes,
but
for sure.
As you said, not every team starts healthy. So if you make it through preseason without any catastrophic injuries, and what I mean by that is, unfortunately, you can have very important players by attrition drop out from injury before the season starts, and that really deflates the balloon pretty quickly. And that's likely why you see more and more less participation in the preseason games and less emphasis on it, and more in the joint practices. So getting back to the game day, it starts much earlier than I think. It basically starts with getting to the stadium, typically about 3 hours before game time. And then we go through our checklist, and that really starts the night before, preparing for who needs what special treatments, game day preparation in order to optimize stretching flexibility, pregame treatments, training room treatments.
Maybe some evaluations of guys who are not sure if they're going to go or not, but have been progressing well. So maybe some on-field evaluations to see if that player's
Absolutely
available.
Correct. And so what part of that pregame, one aspect of the pregame workday is that you have to determine who is active and inactive. And there's a certain number that can be active, usually a 53-man roster. And so you can carry, I believe it's 57 or something in that range, but that means you're going to have some inactives. You have to decide who you have reserves. And so if there is an injury, for example, and they're progressing well at rehab and we're not sure, and we've been monitoring all week and we haven't been able to determine absolutely they can go, sometimes it comes down to the wire where by like 11 a.m., sometimes at noon, you have to declare who's active and inactive to the league. And so an on-field evaluation, say at 10:30 or 11 on a 1 o'clock game day, you run them through and you see how they look, and then you determine, all right, does it make sense to go? So that is sometimes the first thing we do is see, all right, who's available, who isn't, who we think is safe to play. And then we go through our checklist and our meetings to make sure we are prepared and everyone is present.
Yeah, so that's where I'm going next. Not to cut you off too much here, but what is the 60-minute meeting?
So the 60-minute meeting is essentially where our medical team and the medical team and staff of the opposing team, along with referees and all those supporting medical cast, meaning on-field paramedics, our airway
management
physician, and your neurotrauma specialist, and so forth. So people that are going to be involved in the game, including spotters who our job is to help us see on-field injury, head trauma, etc., all get together in one room at a specific time, along with the referees, and make introductions so everyone knows who they are. You basically go around the room, introduce what you do, who you are, and then we explain at a home game where all things are so they're familiar. They get an EAP packet, which is the emergency action plan that delineates where things are ahead of time. And then we go over where the ambulance is, if they need a cart, where the stretcher is, where x-ray areas. We introduce the x-ray techs. We introduce our paramedics. We introduce the person that will be their neuro specialist on their sideline and our sideline. We introduce the airway management physician. The league introduces themselves. The referees introduce themselves and give their preferences of how to communicate to get injured people off the field safely, and how to communicate if they have an injured player, who they contact, and they'll stop the game and where to bring them. So there is a lot that goes on behind the scenes to make sure we are prepared, ready. We know where we're supposed to be, which is very specific parts of the field to the inch of where you stand, where you'll be, and when you do your thing. And so that is to make sure that we're prepared for any emergency that occurs, and hopefully it doesn't.
Yes. So it's better to be over prepared in this. And I think it's great that you went through all the people who are involved in that, because it really takes a whole team, medical team speaking, to cover these games. We have people up in the booths who are watching replays and making sure that players are safe and calling down to us. We have independent consultants. We have emergency room physicians for all that sort of stuff. So it's not just us and our medical colleagues on the Jets. It's everyone else who
There's a lot of assistance. There's a lot of supporting cast, and there's a lot of specialties, which of course is extremely helpful to all involved to make it, a safe and effective day. We also bring with us a eye specialist, an ophthalmologist. We have a dentist. This isn't hockey, but at the same time, there are injuries and we need to be prepared to be able to address them safely.
Yeah.
It also facilitates communication if they need to leave the premises to get further specialized care. We coordinate with local hospitals. We have a level 1 trauma center that's very close to the stadium so that we're prepared and know where they're going to go. We know who to contact, and they're on call for any emergency, so they're ready. We have our hospital in Morristown on call with our emergency room physicians that will be with us on the sideline, that have people available so we can expedite care directly to the emergency room so that we take good care of our players and opposing players, and a communication line that gets information back quickly, because these teams, for example, visiting teams, it's a military operation and it's very time sensitive and it's laid out and the plane stops for no one.
Right.
And so we need to get them evaluated. For example, if they need a CAT scan because they're afraid they might have broken rim or pneumothorax and they don't want to fly. We have a state police escort to Morristown. They get their CT scan that gets communicated to us by the ER trauma specialist. It then gets to the team and they get back to the plane, they meet, and they can get their team with their player safely home. And if not, we arrange to have people take care of them. So there's a lot that's of moving parts that are going on during game day.
And as you said, this is all prepared well in advance. We have these plans. We even practice a lot of these, emergencies well before the season as a team with all these specialists. So we're prepared when these things happen. So we get to the game starting then, and there's an injury and you're out on the field assessing the player. He's someone who's able to get up and walk off. I'm going to ask the question that everyone really wants to know. What the heck happens in the blue tent?
Well, that's a secret. I could tell you, but then... So what's interesting is that the blue tent, the history behind the blue tent dates back several years, but it really was developed at Alabama. And what they found is that there's a lot of people that are watching, and cameras and media, and out of respect for player privacy, for an appropriate assessment, especially if it's a concussion or a concussion assessment, it's only fair to give them some privacy and an ability to do a sideline assessment without distraction. And so that is put up for those reasons. It's very helpful, but obviously can't stay up during the game because it could be a dangerous obstacle to negotiate around. But I do think it has some value, and you do your assessment and can interact, I think, more appropriately with the player and make a determination. And if you can't do it there, it allows us to make an assessment. Is it simple and easy? Can they go back to play safely, or do we need to do more? If we need to do more, then we then branch out, divide and conquer. We'll have someone, either me or you, take them in to get an x-ray if we want to double check and make sure that it's safe to go, and we need an x-ray, we'll do that, bring them to the locker room, tape, make sure their ankle's okay, and then they'll come back out, do a little field testing, and go back on the field. That's a long way around the loop. Sometimes they just go to the sideline, get a spat, which is tape over their cleats, reinforce if they have a little ankle tweak, and back out to play.
Right. And so I think, especially in today's day and age with phones everywhere, there can be a competitive advantage to a team knowing a certain player has a certain injury. So the blue tent allows, to your point, us to assess the injury, get them cleared or not cleared, treatment if needed. So sometimes there can be, certain body parts that maybe player doesn't want to pull down pants to get a knee brace on or whatnot. So it gives them that privacy, gives the trainers some privacy and ourselves as well.
And to your point, competitive advantage is such a big thing in this world. And with betting and all the rest, you have to be forthright. And that's why you see why the injury report and the injuries are put on the board every so often during the game. You have to list immediately if someone's out. They have to report what the injury is and what their status is immediately.
Right. And so status could be what?
You could be anything from doubtful, questionable, probable to in or out, right? So, and that's a very important part of the process for the integrity of the game. Open information to all, hence why communication devices to the outside world are not allowed on the sideline.
Even like Apple Watches and things like that.
Oh, there's big fines for that.
Yeah.
And so there is a process and there's a lot of rules, but some exceptions. Those rules have to do with medicine and the care of player. So it's a big responsibility for us to negotiate what we need to do for the best care of the player and communication to other medical professionals. Hence why sometimes you think we're Secret Service, but we have these walkie-talkies and headphones on. That's not to look like, Men in Black, but it's really to make sure that we communicate to all parties because everyone on the field can hear, both up in the booth to inside to other medical professionals, to communicate how to coordinate care.
And so game ends. Hopefully it's a gangrene victory. What happens post-game locker room? How late are you there after the game?
So that's the mad rush. So after the game, we need to assess and evaluate players. We need to figure out who needs more care, who needs further workup and imaging, how we're going to handle any injuries that occur, and how we're going to manage the injury process during the week. It all starts immediately after the game, gathering information, making sure they get what they need, whether that be a brace, whether it's just icing, whether it's an image that night or setting up an image for the following morning because we're concerned and we think that, all right, we want to better assess this. And then first thing in the morning, we'll get an MRI and then I'll meet you in the training room. So we are preparing for the post-game, post-day after training room. So every game there is a injury clinic.
Which is where I'm going next.
Which is the following morning, and everything you do that evening, which sometimes can take us 2 hours, at least 1 to 2 minimum after the game, sometimes more, to get everything done. We do get a lot of x-rays there. We have x-ray at the stadium that helps screen things and determine, what's going on at a lower level of imaging. But sometimes the people need an MRI, so we need to arrange that ahead of time.
Yep. And so, once we've got that in motion, we kind of have a game plan for, assessments early on. So then what is Monday like?
So then the following day, we have an idea of who we need to see based on that post-game injury evaluation in the training room. But sometimes people will suddenly realize they have some injuries they didn't think were that bad, but maybe overnight they got a little worse. So they show up and we'll assess new injuries that they thought weren't that serious, but maybe they got more concerned overnight. And so we didn't know about them. So they'll either call ahead and let our athletic trainer know, or they'll show up and ask for, an assessment. And so we're available for the whole team. Typically we'll have a list of people that we may need to follow up on that we saw the night before and review their imaging and determine a management plan.
And so part of that management plan, maybe, so once you've assessed them, you've sort of got a sense of injuries, maybe there's something that's going to require time off for treatment. And then you meet with the front office and the coaching staff and...
Yeah, so to run a team, you need to know who's available, who can play. And if you don't have people to play, you need to find people that can play. So maintaining a team is a little more challenging in football than it is, say, sometimes in baseball or a non-contact sport where there's far greater attrition week to week in football than some sports. And so we need to manage the roster and injury assessment and prediction of time needed to get better or a chance to come back. Very important because the front office is in charge of making sure the roster is as competitive as possible. So they need to find replacements, and that begets a lot of phone calls and searching and potentially arranging for what happens the following day is physicals.
Right. And so all 32 teams are kind of in the same boat on those days. I mean, it may be Tuesday if they played Monday night or whatnot, but everyone's sort of in that same situation. So that brings us to Tuesdays. That tends to be my day to be there. That tends to be when we bring in free agents. I think you went through that very well as how we have to assess the free agents. I think when I was first starting off working with you guys, you said, look, this is kind of like being a private investigator. Everyone's going to come in saying they feel great, but you got to just make sure with their history that everything looks as good as they say they feel. And, we do our due diligence there to make sure, again, whoever's being brought in is healthy to play, first and foremost, for that player. And then secondly, that it's something that is not going to be a long-term potential issue or injury that.
And the thing is that it's kind of like sometimes speed dating or musical chairs, because if one team has an injury, they'll have so many spots, they may have to release someone in another position to get someone else for an injury position. And so you're swapping in and out constantly throughout the season. So, players kind of roam around and switch teams and fill spots. And it's an interesting merry-go-round every Monday to Tuesday, as you know.
Right. And so once we get that sort of sorted out on Tuesday, that tends to be an off day for the players. Wednesday, Thursday, they're back at practice. Anything particularly special about those days, or?
It depends on the coach, the coach and their philosophy. And so there'll be days where there's contact, non-contact. It depends on when in the season and the philosophy of the coach. So some days potentially more risky when they go live and full pads or uppers or non-contact. And then they're installing their game plan, watching film. We're managing injuries, rehabbing on the field. We have a smaller but a continuation of our injury clinic, as you know, each day. One of us is there. And then the whole week is trying to get people healthy and figuring out who's going to be healthy in time to play safely and who isn't, and trying to figure out if they're not, who could participate in their place. And so that needs to be sort of squared away as the week goes on. Injury reports need to be filed every day in terms of status so that it's open to the public. And then we sort of get an idea of where we're going to be, and the coach needs to be able to game plan so he needs to know who's going to be there. And so that's the week is spent doing that. And each day you're gathering data, reassessing availability and status. And sometimes, like we said in the beginning of this, it comes down to the 11th hour right before the game when you do your on-field assessment.
And so then, the teams usually travel on Saturday if they have an away game. For a Sunday game, you travel with the team.
So it, again, is a military operation, as you know, and there's a lot of people involved in the process, not just medical, but there's media, there is trainers, there are coaching, there's staff, there's administrative side. So there's a lot that goes into it, and it's a big operation, and there's a lot of equipment and things that need to go with the team to make it happen. And so care doesn't just happen in the training room, or it doesn't just happen in the office. We need to make sure and ensure the safety of the players going to the airport, on the plane, when they get to the hotel. We have a paramedic, we have life support equipment available. It's a traveling medical sort of army along with the soldiers, so to speak, and the military operation of moving large things from one location to the next. So much goes into that coordination wise through operations and so forth that it takes a year to set this up and plan and move that much equipment and people.
Yeah. Having been on it, it's an impressive feat what is accomplished by, the operations team there. And then we're at game day again, which we've been through. And that brings us to we repeat it. So we do that, maybe 17 times 18 times during the regular season. We get the bye week, which is a nice week off.
It's a rinse and repeat. And then they throw some monkey wrenches at you. So Monday night football, Thursday night football can be challenging in terms of schedule management. Evaluations change days, things. It's nice when it's Sunday to Sunday. It's a very routine schedule. Also, London, as you know, this is the year you're away for a long period of time and you're negotiating through a foreign medical system. And so it's interesting, but also at the same time taxing a little bit because you have to organize a lot to make that happen. The NFL does help with that, but very interesting to see. Fun to experience, but certainly getting a little old for jet lag.
Yeah. No, I hear you. It can be a long trip for short time. And it's interesting because there's more of that coming in the future based on what the NFL schedule is looking like. Seems like more countries involved and more games going away. So we'll see. That'll be very exciting. So that's great. So that kind of gives you a summary. It's a very busy week during the season, and it's no week is the same depending on, we can have a really healthy game and we can have a disaster of game. So as we get going through, then it brings us sort of towards the end of the season. And we're going to hold that thought for our next episode, unless you have something else to add about the in-season weekly routine.
The only thing I'd add about the game day and even each week is it's like being a fireman. Like, it can be quiet, things can be great, and snap of a finger, it can be chaos. And so it keeps you on your toes.
Definitely keeps you on your toes. Well, we appreciate you joining us again for the OrthoZone for this second episode of a 3-part series with Dr. Andrew Willis. We hope you'll join us for the next episode of the OrthoZone. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an update. Don't forget to share the podcast with others who might find it helpful, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Tri-County Orthopedics to stay connected. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.